Hey guys, welcome back. BDCKR here. It's been a couple weeks. It's been a particularly
long couple weeks.
Yeah, been a particularly tough exam season for me. So I've had to focus in on that, but I'm finally off for the holidays. So.
Well, priorities instead of that sweet, what, $2 ad revenue each episode? Not even. Probably.
I feel a little bad, especially
that's all right.
for patrons. But the money we can.
Well, that's why I've been trying to hold up our end of the bargain with our patrons, and I think I think I've done not bad considering what I was working with. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're back with our new season now, season 9, episode 1, because we like changing up the title every time we take sort of more than 1 week off here and there. So we've got some questions, and they've been a while in the pipe.
Yeah.
We are not getting these fresh. So we'll get straight into it.
Except for this one, maybe.
Except for this one.
The first one, I thought it was interesting to pull up.
Yeah. So Bent Wall says, hey guys, you responded to my comment last week and answered my question about the Riddler's cane. Figure I will take a shot in the dark and see if you answer this one. Sorry that it's not related to your video. You are the only authority on this game that I trust besides the wiki. This week I'm attempting to get Master's Death Card to activate Claw of Horus. According to the wiki, it works. However, even when I have tagged the character in, use a special, tag them out, and then tag them back in again, I can't get it to activate. The wiki even says it can take down all 3 gears. I'm going to keep trying, but if anybody knows what's up, and then ...
Right.
So yeah, first off, the questions never have to be related to the video. That's the beauty of YouTube, is that the worst thing that we're ever going to do is not respond, unless you say something really mean, but also like worryingly accurate. Or really manage to touch on some sort of deep insecurity we have. I don't even know what that would look like in the form of a YouTube comment.
I don't think that's possible.
Or you're saying something weird like our home address and like our dates of birth. There's not a lot you can do in the comments that I would dislike actively. Because at the end of the day, anybody who feels like they want to share something. So no apologies there. We always appreciate stuff. And we also like comments like this because these are interesting, right?
Right.
When you give us something that you think you're supposed to be able to do, when you're giving us sort of your understanding of why you think it's possible, and then steps you're taking, right?
Right.
That is sort of something that we can sink our teeth into a little bit. Right. It's sort of that halfway point between a question so broad that we can say anything about it. It's a very specific goal endpoint of, can you do this? Can you do X? I'm trying Y to make it happen, but it's not working, is something that we can actually look at. So yeah, it's a pretty good question.
And I do want to point out then, because of the last couple of weeks, we weren't doing Q&As. I was doing things having to with new characters and new teams. And they're sort of new and they're sort of not. What I want to point out is that right now you're watching a series of fights with New 52 Superman as the Superman component of our Justice League team. But we've got a Red Sun team later where we'll show you exactly what we're talking about right now. Mm-hmm. And to me, it falls under the umbrella of leveraging the ability of different gears to trigger extra other gear effects or other special effects.
Yeah, synergy combos.
Yeah, and doing it in a way that it shouldn't be obvious that you should be able to do it. So, for example, what happens when we're talking about Master's Death Card here, Master's Death Card, when you come in, the ability is that there's a bunch of unblockable hits.
Yeah.
What actually happens is that those hits count as attacks. They generate power. They can give you mostly 1 bar when you tag in, as long as there's no power dampening. And they can give you more than a bar if you've got some power gen gear. Mm-hmm. The same way it would benefit you if you were just doing hits. So why that's important is not on the first tag in, because in the first tag in, if you do a special right away, doesn't matter. On the second tag in that fight, if at the moment that the Master's Death Card's little things, pitter-patter hits are hitting, you trigger a special at the same time, you will get the special effect, whether it's directly from the special, like damage over time, or other gears that affect the special, like Claw of Horus, which has a 75% chance of breaking gear. Mm-hmm. You can trigger it, and then you can have like 5-6 times where you're triggering the effect of Claw of Horus so that you're almost guaranteed that at least 3 of them are going to trigger enough to shatter every piece of gear.
Yeah, so, in terms of what went wrong, it's hard to say exactly in your situation. It might be a timing thing. You don't specifically mention doing a special the second time you're pulling them in.
Yeah. Well, and I answered this question actually in the comments, but I think it's important to not so much important as it's easier to explain in words and describing it when we're going to see it later on in the fight. That you've got to trigger the special at the moment those hits are coming in. So if you were relying on Master's Death Card to be your only source of power, you might have a problem because by the time you generate the power from the hits are gone. Yeah. You're not getting the advantage of the special overlapping it so that the game recognizes those little hits as an extension of the special.
Yeah.
Now, I do want to say, though, that that's not my favorite way of using Claw of Horus or leveraging Claw of Horus. I actually prefer, and you're going to see it with the Red Sun team later, that having 2 bars of power on your Claw of Horus person is actually, to me, the best way. You do the first special. There's a moment after that where if you're using Enchantress gear, the skulls come flying in, but it's not right away. And if you pause a little bit and then launch the special one as the skulls are supposed to be coming in, that second hit will pretty much wipe out all of their gears.
Yeah, and that doesn't require the tag out, tag in. It can be a little...
that's right.
Less finicky, potentially.
Right. And so in the times where you're actually trying to do it, I think picking one person to tag in, tag out isn't great. Although it is a really good strategy when the Phantom Zone is around and you've got 120 damage. When you're doing the Elite Crystal and you need 120 damage over time effects triggered, then it's worth it because how long it takes to do it. What you do is you tag in your special person, maybe have Ibis stick on them.
Yeah. Tag
them back out and tag them back in. And the moment they tag in, immediately. So the way we like to do it is with New 52 Wonder Woman. Tantu Totem, Master's Death Cart, and Ibis stick. Tagging the first time, do a special, tag her out, and then the next time she tags in, whoever's in front of her, she can lay a bunch, like somewhere between like 5 to 10 damage over time effects.
Yeah.
You get the bonus on top of that, so that it's quite possible in just 2 rounds to satisfy the Phantom Zone task of 120 damage over time effects just by doing that. And it just seems to work better because if you're relying on doing the Claw of Horus shattering on the tag-in, you have to make sure you have a bar of power coming in. And that's actually more of a pain than just making sure that they have 2 bars of power before you start trying to shatter all their gear.
Yeah, because you can just build that up. Although, to be fair, you can build up 2 bars of power and then tag out, or bars of power and then tag out and then tag back in.
That's true. Again, it's just a bit of work because the easiest way to do it is with Tantu Totem. And if you've got somebody with Tantu Totem, my preference isn't to have Claw of Horus on them because... So here's my rationale. Tantu Totem to me is your highest damage output person.
Yeah.
If you're going to put Claw of Horus on them, you're using up a slot that you could use for more damage.
Yeah.
And you're making it... so you give up some damage for that. And sometimes you don't even care about the gear. If your damage output person is strong enough, it doesn't matter. So to me, it's a fallback person to do the Claw of Horus if you happen to see Astro Harness and you want to just sort of strip all the gears from them.
Yeah, because the best way to take advantage of Tantu Totem is to make sure that you're doing as few specials as possible that don't knock people out.
Right.
Yeah. So there we go.
An interesting question. I do appreciate that. It's interesting because sometimes you remember when we were trying to instruct people on how to do glitches when there was a lot more of them and there was a lot more steps. It was the reason why we even started doing this channel, really, because we'd find instructions on how to do something. They weren't clear enough from the way they were describing them. And the best way, I think, was to just demonstrate it in real time and explain exactly what we're doing. And I think that was part of the reason why we were so successful to start. Yeah.
So there we go. Our next comment comes from MZ, or MZ if they're not Canadian, MZ. Or from the UK.
Okay. So MZ, Z, the letter, it always bugged me that there's so many letters whose names are basically hard to tell apart. Like E, everything that ends in E.
Yeah.
B, C, D, E, G. Like the fact that they stuck another one, Z, when they could have just as easily been Z. And I think just Z is objectively better pronunciation than Z.
Well, when you say could, I don't even know what leads you to pronounce letters one way or the other, right? Like when it says it's M, right? Like I don't know where we decided that was the pronunciation. I don't have that sort of linguistics knowledge. Couldn't any character be pronounced as nearly anything? Like,
yes.
Even if it made the sound. Even if it looked the same and made the sound. Couldn't you just call it whatever you want? So that they're all distinct, and that's kind of what the, like, Alpha, Beta, Charlie, Delta, like, what's that called again?
Oh, that's the...
when you're, like, reading out. Yeah,
the pilot's kind of way to say what the letters are, so there's no misunderstanding. So there's no... You're disambiguating the different letters.
Yeah, so that there's no
Foxtrot,
way
Charlie.
to confuse them, yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know. It's something, right? Like, it's...
Yeah, I don't know what that's called.
Yeah, we'll figure that out after.
But anyways, yeah, so I don't know where Z or Z came from. I just know that those, like, saying, like, out of the options, it's like they went to the store and they had, two things up on the shelf, and they're like, this one's gluten-free, and this one says low carbs, so I don't know.
Okay, so there's only one other letter whose name bugs me the same way as W. Every other letter, I think, it's really relatively easy to say. It's one syllable.
Yeah.
So it takes longer to name the letter W than it does to make the noise wah.
Yeah. So you think it should be called what?
It should be called something. It could be we even. But is there any other letter like that?
I don't think so.
Wah. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, P, Q, R, S, T, U, V, what, X, Y, Z.
This is some real compelling content. In case you wanted to know the alphabet.
I'm feeling a little punchy today because it's been a long time. It's been weeks since I've been able to rely on having like a partner doing this instead of trying
since you've spoken to anybody,
yes,
and had them respond to you. Normally, you just go through life with saying things at people, and then them just sort of wandering off
for a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's been. So we have a question. Sorry, yeah, MZ had a question.
Yeah, so MZ had a question, and they say, another question: do you guys prioritize healing in Survivor mode? I still can't pass round 9 of Survivor.
Okay, easy answer. So we're gonna put a link in the description, and if we're motivated, it'll be the eye in the top right corner too, where we've got tips from Survivor from when Survivor first came out. Mm. Like, when did Survivor first come out? How old has it been?
I don't even know.
Let's take a look. So we create that playlist. Oh, has it been 2015?
Yeah, 6 years.
6 years ago we did this. So I'll tell you, the strategy hasn't really changed. It was an excellent strategy then. It's an excellent strategy now. And all you need are some of the really good bronzes. In my preferences is always Flash.
Yeah.
Green Lantern's good. Nightwing is great because he's got the power drain on Special 1. Mm-hmm. And so the key really is finding a team that has a decent amount of balance in terms of the abilities that you want. You give them gear that's useful, and you should be able to motor through at least the first 7 or 8 fights with only your bronze characters.
Yeah.
And so, I know I'm not answering the question yet, so do you prioritize healing? I mean, the short answer is no. Mainly because by the time healing is... Alright, so how healing is useful is, in the fights, if you can heal yourself up before you finish the fight, then you don't have to spend money or credits on paying for a health sort of recharge. Mm-hmm. The problem with that technique is, even when you're doing it properly, you're giving up at least 1 gear slot to do it, and you're banking on being able to plan it well enough so that you knock them out right at the end when you've just healed yourself, and they don't hit you one more time right before you finish them off.
Yeah. And
it's not that easy. I think like with a lot of fights, I think the importance is actually prioritizing damage output.
Yeah. And, there is something to be said for survivability, but that doesn't generally take the form of, like, direct, like, healing. It's not like healing gears. It's more like, like Raven's ability or something like that, where you can...
Right.
It really depends on how you're talking about healing, right? Because technically that is, your health increasing. And I think a lot of people would think about that as healing. So we don't prioritize healing gears, but we do prioritize hardiness, right? Yeah. In one form or another. Yeah. And sometimes that involves getting health back somehow, yeah.
And I'll tell you what, too. I think a big part of actually being hardy is just not being good enough that they don't have a chance to damage you. That's why the power drain is so important, because one of the ways that your opponent damages you is doing specials. If you take away their ability to do specials, you've got more health at the end of the fight.
A lot of times that's actually better than anything that's just healing you, because you just don't take that damage in the first place.
Right.
And the problem with healing is that there's always a risk of you screwing something up, not doing it fast enough, whatever else.
Right.
Right? And that's a risk no matter what. But the faster you're able to complete the fights on average, the less time there is for you to make a mistake.
Right.
Basically, the longer you play, the more likely you are to make a mistake. You're sort of... in a lot of other modes, your goal is winning. But in Survivor, you really are playing attrition. So most of the time you're playing sort of damage control. Right?
Right.
So you don't want to get whacked, really.
Right.
It more than almost anything else. And in this case, the best way to avoid it is just to spend less time in the fight and more time winning. Right.
I will say, though, that I guess if we're talking about Survivor tips, one of the underrated characters, and this is almost criminal. I mean, as much as something in Injustice can be criminal, because, it's not really. Nobody's going to jail for playing Injustice. Wrong. It's Containment Doomsday. He gets a lot of flack when people have been putting up tier lists recently. And and that's actually, I should point out that was one of the inspirations for some of the fights that you guys have been seeing in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
And the fight that you're going to see at the end of this, which is, New 52 Superman was because this week is his challenge, but the Red Sun team is because Devlin 16, one of the mods on the Injustice subreddit, was asking about, we were having a conversation, he was asking about Red Sun teams.
Yeah.
And what was the point I was making? Oh, and that was inspired by a tier list. And Containment Doomsday is excellent for Survivor because, Survivor, your opponents will scale up or down according to your team. And it just, keeps on jumping up the further you go. And Containment Doomsday has 50% revives 3 times. So if you take 100% of health plus the 350s, that's 150 plus 100. So even if he's down to almost no health, and you keep him in the game, he gets all of his revives back with each new fight.
Yeah.
So he's got at least, bare minimum, 60% of his health starting the fight no matter what, as long as you survived.
Yeah.
That's great. Because you don't have to pay anything. Mm-hmm. And if you want to, you can. But he's going to have at least 60%. You don't have to worry about doing anything else. He just has to survive. If he loses 249% of his health, if he takes 249% health damage, he's got 1% left, he's still going to start with 60% of his health in his pool.
Yeah.
So...
of his total pool. That's 60% of his total pool and 150% of whatever it reads on his card.
Right.
At least.
So the tier list, I think, when you make a tier list, and we've been asked a lot of times for making one, it neglects a lot of how you play them. Mm-hmm. People can look at them objectively, and it's not unfair to do that, to say, these abilities are really great. But in the context, I think I said this last week, is that because we play them as a team, it would be wrong to assess how good a character is if you don't look at them on their ideal team.
Yeah, because almost every character that's good, right? The best teams are made up of characters who need to be on a team together in a lot of cases. Right. And the best characters are really the ones that are just on the most great teams.
Right.
And like a gear tier list actually makes a lot more sense than a character tier list, because those are sort of on their own merits. They modify something else. They aren't modified by other things. And you can sort of go, okay, well, specials is the most important in the meta, so special gears get a little bit of a preference.
Well, they're only the most special because of Tantu Totem.
Yeah.
If it weren't for Tantu Totem, they wouldn't actually be that important. Like, I still think that there's a little bit of interplay.
Oh yeah, no, there absolutely would still be interplay, but I think you can sort of almost tease apart gears. In a way that I would feel more comfortable about being, like, and what's like S tier or S plus, right?
Yeah.
Whatever, like, top of the pack is clearly Tantu Totem.
Yeah.
Right? And then you just sort of work down there for stuff that synergizes really well with Tantu Totem, and then probably like the peak gears for like Astro Harness and stuff, right? You work your way through sort of each of the types of roles and then what's the best and then your way down. But with characters, it's so, complicated. Because it matters not only every other person on their team and how they've been, done up, right? Whether they've been augmented in their gear loadout. Sometimes the gear loadout of the other members of their team also matters.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Right?
And so this is the point I was making with Containment Doomsday was, so there we're talking about just fights in general.
Yeah.
Containment Doomsday doesn't have anybody as good as him if you're worried about not spending money on health. So he should rank much higher.
Yeah.
Not because, people look down on him because he's got low stats, they don't like, especially whatever. He's the fastest Doomsday. He's got a 3-hit swipe combo. Remember the original Doomsday? It was like a 2-hit swipe combo?
Yeah.
So he's actually really important for Survivor. And because of that, because Survivor plays such a big part in being able to, because you have to grind it. If you want to have a good team and a good collection, you have to grind it because you're not going to get enough augmentations to really maximize your characters.
Yeah.
I think Containment Doomsday is really important. Oh, and I guess, so I think there's a threshold. To me, it's somewhere around 9, 10, at most 11 or 12 fights. Where after that, the fights just get longer, even if you got a really good team.
Yeah.
So if you're farming Survivor to get the last laugh tickets and some of the gear sets or augmentations, then that's sort of the sweet spot for fighting. You don't really want to go past 9, but once you do, then maybe healing is a little bit more important. Hard to say because the other team gets so much more powerful. So damage output is important, but you can't get it fast enough that healing doesn't matter the same way. So you do want some of the characters like Raven, who's going to swap out. But what you can do is, if you play so this is spoiler alert if you're not going to watch the videos. They're short videos, and they're, in my humble opinion, they're pretty good.
Yeah.
You fight as far as you can with 3 bronzes. Let's say 7, 8, or 9. Let them die. Like, finish the fight. Don't swap out if you've got only one guy left. Fight until your last team member is knocked out. Then you swap out for a silver.
Yeah.
That silver stats will, because the original fight sort of randomization or the matchmaker set up the opponent stats sort of scaled up to yours. Their bronze team, now your silver's got better stats. Your silver should mow through the other team, gives you a free win. Then fight with the silver. Let yourself lose, but you got to get the matchup first. And then you swap out one more time for gold.
Yeah.
So you extend your, whatever fight you can get to, you extend it by 2. And then you still got all your prizes because you've only done 2 swaps. You still got a 3rd swap left.
Yeah.
To me, that's the ideal strategy because
it does prevent you from having a full team.
And
in the higher
levels. Yeah, for sure.
And you lose out on passives now.
Yeah. That's true. But I think to me the key is, unless you're really like at a high level where you've collected a lot of things and you're not really grinding for resources, then in which case, when you try to finish Survivor, we got one where we finished Survivor back in the day when it was maybe not as many fights. Yeah, it was a little different. Then I think you want to prioritize the most efficient way of getting through. Okay, so you just saw that now with where Batman just stripped Joker of all his gears.
Yeah.
But you're going to prioritize finishing the fights more quickly. You're going to prioritize an efficient accumulation of laugh tickets. I think really 9 to 12, that's a sweet spot. And if you're doing starting with bronze, you can get to round 9. I can't even remember what we did the first time around, but I think we did, our first demonstration was actually probably like 11 or 12. You gear them up properly. The bronze team is gold.
Mm-hmm.
Haha, that was a pun.
Funny.
Not really. Like I said, I'm just not used to talking to people, so this is I'm feeling a little punchy right now.
That's fair. So yeah, that's a sort of broad strategy for how you can get through stuff and hopefully push a little bit further than wherever you're at right now.
Right.
Our next question comes from Yang Song, and they say, if the video image could match with the oral content, it will attract more attention from me. And so I think we've talked about this before. Almost certainly. We've done this for so long. We've talked about everything. There's no new questions, no new content.
Oh, is that the way they say there's no new story? That every story has been told once before in a different form? Like the original story was Beowulf, but even then there was more stuff that was just the first written, documented story.
Yeah, exactly like that. I was making a really clever allusion to that saying that I've definitely heard. And so we did a little bit of that this episode. And the other thing is that would take so much time. We don't have that kind of time, guys. I don't know. I mean, we just spent... I just spent multiple weeks not being able to film because of stuff I had in my life. If we had to make sure that we were on topic on what we were showing...
Yeah.
And then most of the time we would just have to be showing, like, I don't know, like random images that we got off like Google or something, because we don't stay on topic a lot, even about when we're talking about the game. I don't even think on a certain level that would be possible.
Yeah.
We'd have to be doing dramatic reenactments of stories we're telling or anything else. It would be a mess.
Now watch, we're going to strip all the gears off Catwoman. Do you like this better? Because we're actually talking about what's on the screen.
This one's for you, Yang Song.
I mean, it looked pretty rough there, right? Like that we weren't going to finish it. I think this gear loadout is actually pretty good for this Red Sun team. Devlin's point was, is it possible to refresh? Because last week was an Arkham Knight team that wasn't completely Arkham Knight.
Yeah.
The same way the Earth 2 team isn't completely Earth 2. Well, this is a Red Sun team that's not completely Red Sun.
Yeah. And
I think it's better for it. You know what? Maybe we'll have another video later just explaining the rationale of why this team is better, but we'll get... I think everybody who's watching this might have been missing questions a lot for the last few weeks, so we should probably not ramble as much as we do.
Give the people what they want.
This is a celebration of a brand new season.
Yeah.
That's separated by just a couple weeks and not much change in content.
No, absolutely no change. We're back and we're as okay as ever.
As okay as ever, yeah.
So our next comment comes from Lemus or Louis, hard to tell.
Luis
could be. There's a lot of ways you can pronounce a name.
I think Luis. This version of it is more of a Hispanic version, right? Like Luis, like French would be Louis, and that's been sort of. Is it not co-opted? But what's the word when you take something from another culture?
Appropriated?
It's been appropriated,
but it's not like cultural appropriation.
No. But the spelling of the name.
Yeah.
So then there's maybe like an Americanized version that's Lewis's. So there's Louis, and Luis here, which I think it's. Let us know. I'm always curious. This kind of stuff is interesting. Not interesting enough to study it or look it up, but interesting enough that when it comes up in conversation, I think,
Yeah, worth putting a second in to pronounce your name right if you want to let us know if we're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
And they say, thank you guys for answering my questions. To add on to the arcade question, I have considered that rather than just consider a character to survive a nuke, what are characters who have a special 2 that hits multiple characters on the opposing team? For example, Batman Beyond Special 2 can hit the entire opposing team, all 3 members, and possibly make it so I do not need to survive 2 different nukes, and instead prevent them from using it. Also, as for Scorpion, thanks for the input. I do realize he'll make the game more challenging, but also the way matchmaking works, since he is a lower tier character, or essentially a weaker gold, I do not typically run into Black's Night Flash. I also use the Quake engine on him, which re-triggers his passive ability. With crit and Catwoman's passive, Scorpion does quite a bit of damage as a basic attacker, just some food for thought.
Right.
So, I think answering the question is the meat of it. We're reading it out just for fairness and fullness of that sort of response to what we said. But what are characters who has special 2 that hits multiple characters on the opposing team? That's always something.
New 52 Wonder Woman. So here's one of the things, right? Like, there's been a few characters in the game, and they may not be so obvious now, that really changed the way the game was played.
Yeah.
Where you had to, plan a little differently, that whatever strategy you're using had to be adjusted, whether it was the way you fought, whether it was your team composition, your team loadout, to address these new kind of threats. Raven was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
And back in the day, people wanted a special 2 that hit only one person.
Yeah.
Because you wanted to hit so hard that it would bypass her passive so you could knock her out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting, right? How I think, just things change over time. So what you're watching is New 52 Wonder Woman. She does a bunch of hits with her special 2. She can't quite hit 3 people the way Batman Beyond does, I guess, unless you soften the opponents up a little bit. But it's not just how many hits they do, but it's whether it's front loaded or back end loaded, and whether it's ranged or not. Because let me give you an example. We love Lobo, right?
Yeah.
Bounty Hunter Lobo has a passive that's screaming to be your specialist, because his special 2 ramps up the amount of damage over time and ramps up the damage the more times you successfully, I don't even know what successfully means. You successfully complete a special 2. I don't know if that means you have to hit. If I paid attention more to the damage output, we'd probably know. But the problem with that is that a lot of times I feel like it's not worth using, because when you tag in with Master's Death card, anti totem, so you could do a special 2, the first hit of his special 2 isn't ranged. You have to be close. And the problem with Master's Death card is it shoves them.
Mm-hmm.
So what it means is that a big part of his special 2, it's front-end loaded. It would do a lot of damage if it actually made contact.
Yeah.
So it's not just a question. I mean, there's a lot of guys that do a lot of special 2s, and I think if we played more with them, we'd have a better sense. I mean, I remember Static did a huge amount, a buttload. Remember Cask? One of the larger cask sizes? A buttload of damage. But, and you've got lots of other guys who do a huge amount of damage that do multiple hits. The worst thing that they did was create characters where their special 2, only the last hit could knock the opponent out. And I'm thinking of exactly Batman Ninja Batman, because we just faced him now. So his special 2 stuns right at the beginning, small amount of damage, and if you give him Cloak of Destiny or Necron Scythe, then his special 2 total can do a huge amount of damage, but it's all wasted because it can't get past the first knockout. So sometimes you not only don't knock, you don't do damage to the next person, you don't even knock them out if they've got a revive.
Yeah. What it reminds me a lot of is where that was actually common, and I think was for everybody, was in WWE Immortals.
Oh,
if you remember that.
Right.
Whereas we specifically did it. And it's interesting because you think out of the two, Injustice is sort of the game that's based a lot more on being cinematic, right?
Yeah.
Based off of sort of like movies and that type of thing.
Right.
But for WWE Immortals, they
Tagging
focused
in,
a
it's
lot
wrestling.
more. Yeah, well, they focused a lot more on the sort of show of it. And so they wanted, when you use the special, if you were throwing somebody around or whatever, if they got knocked out in the middle of it, they figured it would look ridiculous if they just replaced somebody in and you're just doing sort of wrestling moves to the empty air. So they had you, even if you would have knocked them out on the first hit, they have you sort of grabbing and flinging their unconscious body around for a little while before you smack them out on the last hit. And so whenever anything did that on Injustice, it was so sort of annoying in WWE Immortals. That
it was
you could
jarring.
be sitting on power and then not have that opportunity to do it. So it always makes me think of that game a little bit when you've got somebody like Batman Ninja Batman, where they've done the same thing, right? Where they've decided that it looked too ridiculous, whereas in Injustice, for the most part, they just let you swing around and do sword swings or flips and acrobatics. You're kicking nothing. You're kicking the space where Batman's job would have been if you didn't just lay him out flat.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So we didn't really answer the question, but I don't know that I have an answer, because I don't know that I play everybody enough to have that kind of expertise. I tend to, the fact that we're even playing and doing these videos now is to me a bit of amazing kind of thing. Longevity. But it means that we have to play in a way that's still enjoyable. And to me, it's enjoyable when I make up teams that have something interesting that gives them a bit of synergy, and not necessarily just to play characters for the sake of playing them because we happen to have them. Yeah,
it's funny because there's a certain, like, we know a lot about the game, and you specifically have meticulously maintained a lot of, like, spreadsheets and stuff that gives you a lot of data and a lot of ways to crunch stuff. And, specials that could hit multiple people is one of those things that, theoretically could be a data point on a spreadsheet. But if you're sort of at that level of stuff, there's so much more. At that point, it almost just makes sense to try characters who you like for the other reasons. And then see how their specials play out in practice. And based off of that intuition. Because after a certain point, right, like that other person was saying that they only trust the wiki and us. Well, first off, there's a lot of people that you are trustable that aren't the wiki or us. We appreciate that sort of vote of confidence. But there's also just a lot of stuff that we go to the wiki for a lot of stuff. Just because there's, after a certain point,
refresh our memory.
we know what we know, but we have this sort of understanding of a specific specific people playing the game.
Right.
And we're nowhere near that sort of big dictionary. So
encyclopedic kind of knowledge.
Yeah, encyclopedic knowledge. So people ask us questions, and it's like, oh man, it would be good to have that information. We don't.
I will point out though, out of all the characters, where I especially like their special 2, like separate from how much damage it does, separate from whatever kind of effects you want out of it, there's probably 3 special 2s that I like the most. Mm-hmm. New 52 Wonder Woman, because it's a lot of hits, they're all pretty much balanced, so you are able to use it more effectively, I think, in different situations. You don't have to worry so much about how it hits and who it lands on.
Yeah.
I really like, I've said this a bunch of times, Teen Titans Raven, because her special 2 is ranged, like fully properly ranged, so that it doesn't matter what distance you are from them. When you land with Master's Death Card, you don't care. As long as they're not blocking, and a lot of times they're not, and even if they are blocking, you just wait for the time where the little pitter-patter of Master's Death Card is almost done, then you're going to land it unblocked. But it is fully ranged, you will get full value for your special 2. And the third one that I love the most, and you probably saw it last week, was Arkham Knight Catwoman, because most characters who have an effect on their specials will have the damage reduced for it. And her special 2 damage is reduced. However, it's only reduced by 25% instead of the usual 50%.
Yeah.
It does a huge amount of damage over time, potentially. And it's not rinseable, which plays right in her passive. She is probably the single best damage over time character, I think, of any of them. And she's my favorite to use. So those 3 special 2s are the best. They all do multiple hits, and they can hit. They can knock out more than one character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then on the other end, you have stuff like Doomsday Prime with his terrible range.
Yeah. You know who else? Yeah, for a special 1. And who else has a really good special 2 back in the day was Man of Steel Superman, because it was one of the few special 2s that did only 1 hit. Yeah. Not like the fake 1 hit that, say, Batman Ninja Batman does, where it's more than 1 hit and it stuns at the beginning, or Arkham Knight Batman, where it does very little damage in the first little bit, then is back and loaded with a huge damage.
But it's actually packed into a single
hit.
A single calculation. There's a single output.
So back in the day, he was really important for dealing with Raven. And there's a lot of people who were saying, oh, Raven's too powerful, the game is now broken because of her. And it doesn't feel like that at all. And part of that is actually Tanty Toto too.
Yeah.
Because you're able to just do so many specials and come into the fight with 2 bars of power easily.
So that's a little bit of reminiscing then there for you.
Yeah.
And we're here at the end of our video, end of the episode this week. Hope everybody's had as much fun. I'm glad to be back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
And how'd you do on your exams?
Remains to be seen. Pretty well so far in everything I've gotten back. So fingers crossed.
Like your feeling about it, like your sort of impression.
It was a hard exam season. But I think I got through it, and I think I did at least well enough, for sure.
Good.
It's
Good
always
stuff.
a little bit of damage control at the exam season. It tends to be either the last thing you need to do well, or the last thing you need to not, drop your mark, right?
Right.
It's either preservation or just sort of a desperate last push to push it up to where it needs to be. So, fingers crossed.
All right.
Anyways,
very good.
yeah, so we'd like to give a huge thank you to some folks. I'd like to give a shout out to Eliza Pondering the Orb Caton. The name says it all. This shout out was brought to you by the Orb.
What?
Ponder it. It's a meme. You can look it up after.
Oh.
Look up Pondering My Orb.
You know what the latest meme was? Jorts, the cat. We just talked about this.
We just talked about this. I know nothing about it.
You are not allowed to butter your coworkers.
So, okay. I don't know, guys. Look up Jorts the cat, I guess. I haven't looked it up yet. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know if I can endorse this message. But you don't know about the Orb either, so we'll see. And we'd also like to give a huge, huge thank you to all the lovely folks who support us on Patreon.
And that would be Victor Gomez, Consul Peasant, and Edwoon at the top tier last word. Sinemac and Mohammed Albshaiti at the Your Message Here tier. Shawn Farrell, Daniel Simonson, Aaron Maule, Michael DeVries, Brandon C., Irvin Ruiz, and Eddydoo at the credited level. And Chris Wolf, Scarlet Danny, Awesome Gamer 241, Pavu RS, Gavin Malott, and Isfar E at the gratitude level.
Here you go. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Komoda!